Alright, if you clicked on this video, let me ask you something. Should Canada really still be loyal to the United States when it comes to trade? My personal answer? Absolutely not. But I know it's more complicated than just a YouTuber with a loud cat saying no. We all know our Prime Minister Mark Carney is on his way to China to talk about trade. And at the same time, the orange guy was standing inside a Ford plant in Michigan, once again repeating that he doesn't need Canada. Honestly, I don't think the Prime Minister's trip to China could have come at a better time. And I'm going to explain why in this video. Today's backdrop comes from Keith, who sent in this photo he took a few years ago at the Fundy Trail Parkway in New Brunswick. Thanks for sending this in, Keith. I really appreciate the support and you sharing this with the community. Okay, let's get to the first report from CBC. And just a quick heads up, for anyone who can't stand the orange guy's voice, he does pop up briefly. But it is important to actually hear the garbage coming out of his mouth, because it really emphasizes why Canada needs to distance itself from this deranged man. Let's get started.
As the Prime Minister takes off on a 4-day trip to China, Donald Trump reminded Canadians why. Touring a Ford factory in the birthplace of the American auto industry, he threatened the death of the auto pact.
We don't need cars made in Canada. We don't need cars made in Mexico. We want to make them here. And that's what's happening. Everybody's moving here. From Canada, they're coming here.
Adding he doesn't care whether the free trade agreement with Canada continues.
It's 2026, and the attitude towards Canada and Mexico is still happening, and it's even escalating. He doesn't want cars from Canada or Mexico. He wants them made in the United States. And he clearly doesn't care about the jobs in Canada or Mexico that are going to be lost because of this. America first, right? I'll get deeper into my thoughts on this once we're done watching today's reports.
It's irrelevant to me. Canada would love it. Canada wants it. They need it.
That imbalance is pushing Mark Carney to thaw relations with China, a country he once labeled Canada's biggest security threat. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson says China-Canada relations have been gradually improving since last year, but it's a delicate dance.
I'm very concerned, and so are my friends in Michigan concerned.
A key point of friction, trade and tariffs. Canada matched the U.S. in 2024, slapping a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles.
So why did we do this back in 2024? Was it because we were geographically close to the United States? Or were we bullied into it? Honestly, I don't know. I'm not a trade expert. Maybe Klaus or House of Elbow can clarify this in their own videos. But here's my point. We did things for the US based on what I believe was friendship and close ties. We matched tariffs because the US did, and in doing so, we hurt our own industries, including the canola oil sector. That friendship and idea of being close partners with our neighbors to the south, it's over. So I really don't think we should be doing things simply because the United States wants us to anymore. Let me know in the comments if you agree with me on this or not.
China hit back with levies on Canadian seafood, pork, and canola.
It's been very difficult. China is our second largest customer, and so they're very significant. We can't replace them very easily.
Any move to lift the EV tariffs now would put Canada out of sync with the U.S., and Ontario's premier says it could hurt Canadian auto jobs.
It would not be good for Ontario and Canada, and it sure the heck wouldn't be good for the U.S., and it wouldn't be good when it comes to negotiating with President Trump.
Well, Mr. Ford, you can't really negotiate with that guy. You've seen what the orange guy said earlier, and so has the rest of the country. Do you really think you can reason with him on keeping the car manufacturing in Canada? Personally, I don't think Canada should be getting on his knees, begging for the orange guy, please, 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 keep the cars made here. He said he would move production earlier last year, and he's saying it again now. Whether it's just empty words or whether he actually follows through, we don't know. But what happens if Trump decides to actually pull the factories out of Canada? Shouldn't we at least have a backup plan? A plan B? The problem I see is that the Canadian auto executives and Mr. Ford seem to be banking on the orange guy, keeping things exactly as they are. And doing that without a backup plan in place feels like a recipe for disaster. What do you think, co-host? Holy shit, she actually responded.
The MAGA movement already noticed the changing tone between China and Canada. Trump's co-campaign manager issued a warning, saying, prediction, this won't end well for Carney. Canadian officials say there could be some relief coming on Chinese tariffs, but they're unlikely to be resolved completely.
This isn't going to end well for Carney. I don't know about you watching right now, but I'm exhausted by the constant threats coming from the orange guy's administration. What is Canada supposed to do? Just keep bending over to the US administration while being disrespected? and threatened with collapse of our auto industry. Some of you might be asking, okay, so what should Canada do? Well, in my non-expert opinion, we need to use this trip to China to renegotiate the canola and EV tariffs. Sure, it'll probably piss off the orange guy. But then again, what happens if he actually does follow through and pulls the auto manufacturing out of Canada, and we have no backup plan? That's the risk. Now, I want to show another report from CBC. This time they go into more detail about what it would actually mean if the orange guy does remove manufacturing from Canada.
The CBC's Chris Ensing joins us now live in Windsor. So, Chris, what did Trump have to say about the auto industry?
Andrew, U.S. President Donald Trump doubling down on the idea that America does not need Canadian-made vehicles. This visit by Trump in the Motor City, a big deal for folks in southwestern Ontario, considering here in Windsor, Essex, about 24,000 people connected with their livelihoods to the automotive industry. So people on the front lines assembling vehicles like the Dodge Charger out here in Windsor, the Chrysler Pacifica, have always been anticipating comments from Trump, wondering what it will mean for their careers. But so are the auto executives that are standing beside Trump as he makes these comments. So at a Ford plant in Detroit, reporters asking him what he makes of this renegotiation effort on CUSMA. Here's how he replied.
We already heard him once. I'm going to fast forward. We don't need to hear him again.
He's making those comments, again, in Detroit ahead of the North American Auto Show, one of the Vehicles of the Year finalists made here in Windsor, the new electric Dodge Charger.
So Canada's auto industry contributes a huge amount to the overall North American auto sector. And right now, there's no guarantee it's going to stay. But here's something I couldn't help but notice in the B-roll footage of the orange guy standing with the Ford executives. Those guys in suits, the ones representing Ford, none of them are speaking up. None of them are pushing back, saying that Canada is critical to the auto industry. And that tells me a lot. It tells me they're perfectly fine with going along with this whole movement. If the orange guy says, move it, I have a strong feeling they'll just say, yes, sir. So honestly, screw Ford in my opinion. Now this next part, we're going to hear about the potential impact on Canadian auto workers, specifically the employees of Windsor, Ontario, who would be directly affected by this.
And so what type of reaction are you seeing to Trump's comments?
Right away, we wanted to get a sense of what people who make Ford engines think about that. They're in Windsor, about 2,000 people who are at engine plants that make what goes inside of the F-150 truck. It's one of the best-selling vehicles in North America, and it's something that President Donald Trump on the floor talked about the quality of the product that's made because of who's making it. And so I reached out to Unifor's head of auto policy, John Dagnolo. He's also the union president at the engine plants here in Windsor, and asked him what he made of the comments from President Trump. And he contextualized how much Canada buys from the United States when we're talking about vehicle production, and how much those engines matter to jobs in the United States. Have a listen.
It doesn't make no sense. It's the number one selling vehicle in Canada. So think about that. We have about 1,800 members here in our community in Windsor. We supply 15,000 workers in the United States. We create a ton of jobs. We're just talking about the F-150. I'm not talking about any other Ford vehicle that we sell. It's the number one selling vehicle, period, in Canada. And to make that statement is absolutely, it's wrong.
I agree with you. It's definitely a wrong statement and a damaging statement as well. And you can be as angry as you want about it. But do you actually have any control over the situation if the orange guy wakes up on the wrong side of the bed one day and decides to pull the plug? You don't. And if that happens, you're suddenly looking at 2,000 plus employees out of a job with no backup plan in place. I'll talk about this more in my rant once this report is finished.
Dagnolo spoke of two things that really are snowballing because of comments and actions made by Trump in his worldview. He said that he's seeing people inside of his operations, members that he represents, who are starting to worry about paychecks. When these comments come, they have a fear that their jobs might be affected, so they stop spending money. They're not going to restaurants. The wallets get tighter. The savings become more important. It affects a community like Windsor across the board. But he also talked about the expected effect of those tariffs in the United States from Trump, who has said that this will reinvigorate the manufacturing industries inside of the United States. Dagnolo points to data from the United States governments that are showing factory employment down year over year following the implementation of these tariffs. He says it's because some companies are hesitant to make big investments because they're not too sure what could happen next.
I know this would be a devastating move on both sides of the border. Canadian jobs will be lost, and if the US isn't ready for these factories or doesn't have enough trained workers, production would be delayed. But to be honest, I could care less about the US side. I care what happens in Canada. Now, just to be clear, I'm not an expert in trade or any of this right now. I'm speaking from the perspective of relationships and trust. I've seen way too many reports since starting my channel where the Canadian auto executives claim that bringing in China EVs would cripple our auto industry. You know, the regular China's bad, blah, blah, blah. Well, you might not even need China EVs to cripple the industry. The orange guy could do that all on his own. So wouldn't it be logical to at least explore backup options if he decides to pull the trigger? That's why I believe our Prime Minister needs to think about what's best for Canada. And we need to stop doing favors for the United States. I don't know exactly why we slapped 100% tariffs on the EVs, but I do know we did it for the US. Maybe it was so Elon could keep a monopoly on EVs in North America. I don't know. And just to be clear, I'm not saying Canada should just bend over to China and let them flood us with their exported cars. Obviously, if anything were to happen, we'd want manufacturing in Canada, or at least have Canadian involvement in the process. Whether or not that would be on the table, I honestly don't know. But one thing's clear to me. The Canadian auto industry cannot rely on the orange guy being in a good mood or simply flying under the radar. The issue has been raised again, and we know how radical his decisions can be. So let me ask those of you who are still watching. Should Canada lift the tariffs off China EVs and push to have manufacturing being done here in Canada? Or should we just hope and pray that things stay the way they are now? I'm genuinely curious to see what comes out of the Prime Minister's trip to China. I know in the past, some of the haters on the channel have called me a commie for even suggesting involvement with China, saying it's a bad country. But at this point, is the United States any better? Something to think about. There's a quote that always comes to my mind when I think about Canada, United States, and China. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And just to be clear, I'm not saying we should be besties with China. We still need to be cautious and stay guarded in any trade relationship. All I'm saying is this. The relationship with the United States is no longer what it once was. And sometimes that means we need to start thinking about options and avenues we never would have considered before. Everything I just said, you can copy and paste it when it comes to the F-35s and the Gripen fighter jets. I hope what I said today makes sense, as trade, manufacturing, and politics are not my areas of expertise. But as a Canadian who sees the relationship with our neighbor crumble, and my fellow Canadian citizens potentially losing their jobs, we definitely need to have a plan B on all fronts. That's all I have for today's video. If you found any value in anything I said today, help out my channel by hitting the like and subscribe button below. Co-host, do you have anything to say? No? I have her at the mic right now, but she's not saying anything. All right, she's mic shy. Have a great rest of the day, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.